I think part of it is the Sailor Moon.
The Sailor
Sanctuary,
Moon
the Sailor Moon stuff was out of nowhere. Where did that come from?
Yeah.
No, the Sanctuary Moon.
You're talking about Murderbot's costume changes, right?
Yeah.
Welcome, friends, to episode 353 of the Ink to Film podcast, where we read the book and then see the movie. I'm filmmaker James Bailey.
And I'm writer Luke Elliott.
And this week we discuss the rest of season 1 of Paul and Carl Weitz's 2025 series, Murderbot. All right, we finished up the show Murderbot, season 1, and this is going to be kind of a cap on our coverage of Murderbot for now, because upcoming, we are going to Worldcon as a podcast, doing a live show for the first time, and we are having Martha Wells herself come on and join us, and we're going to talk about the adaptation, and it's a creative conversation. If you haven't seen those, we've done them quite a few times before, where the author of the source material comes on and talks about the adaptation. So look forward to more Murderbot in the future, but for now, let's talk about the end of the show.
Yeah, that's 1 month away today. It is July 15th as we're recording this, so we're 1 month out from our live show. I'm so excited about Worldcon. It's our first ever con that we've gone to together, convention. It should be really fun. We're both on some other stuff as well. All that'll be in the show notes if you're curious. I know we talked about it last week and we put out an announcement, so we won't linger on it too long, but it's just really kind of exciting for us. And between that and hitting 1,000 subscribers on our YouTube, which is something we've been trying to get to for a while now, there's just some fun momentum for the show, which I'm enjoying.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, me too. And speaking of fun, I had a lot of fun with this show. And here we are, having finished out episodes 6 through 10 of this show here. And, as we talked about last week, there are some changes, some differences between the source and this adaptation, obviously, as there tend to be. But I'm going to be interested to dig into like how all of this culminated for you, because just for myself personally, I feel like the things that I was noticing about some of the more broad areas and some of the focus on certain characters that wasn't in Martha Wells' original material culminated in some nice moments that wrapped it up to where I kind of understood where they were coming from and made a really fulfilling story that felt of the same ilk of the original material. Like, it feels like it's in conversation with it. And we've mentioned multiple times now how Martha Wells herself has said that she sees this as really great fan fiction of her work and like her being involved. There's so much cool stuff going on with this, and I do like to see the creators involved in this way. When this happens, there's often a part of me that's like, well, if Martha Wells says, I think we're in for it. How that kind of hits the audience, I think, is up to their interpretation.
Yeah, man. I'm kind of two minds of this show currently still. I agree. I had a good time with it. I think this is a difficult show for the book purists out there.
Yeah.
I am married to one. My wife Annalisa watched the show with me and was more annoyed at some of the changes than I was. She has read the entire series that's out currently. I have not. I've only read 3 books. If you don't remember that from our previous episodes, I've read 3 of the books so far. I actually really want to read some more of them, and I might. Just whenever I can squeeze them in. Since I'm the one who kind of has the book knowledge, I'm like, there's no reason why I can't read on, even if maybe I'll make James wait if we get for season 2, which, by the way, confirmed, season 2 is happening. Yeah,
I was going to say that. So I think it would be cool for you to have some more of the context too, for that audience that when we interview Martha Wells, I think that added information will only serve to, have the interview.
I'll work on shoring up my Murderbot experience and knowledge before season 2 for sure.
But like you said, season 2 is coming out, and I actually did hear Chris and Paul, I believe it was Chris who actually said it. The next 3 books, I believe, are going to be adapted in season 2.
Interesting. Okay, so I've read 2 of the next 3, so I need to at least read the next one, or the third one. I mean, the next 2 are both short. They're both novellas, like the first one we read. But I don't know about the one after that. I'm curious. I don't know if it's another novella or if that's where the first novel length project came out. We can do more research into that. But just touching back on that, it was interesting watching the show with someone who was having not as good a time as me. She was having fun. Like, don't get me wrong. She was enjoying the show, but she would often be frustrated with changes that were being made. And I think the shift in tone, which we touched on in our first episode on the show, how it is a more comedic focus, I feel like I got on board with more quickly. But I don't know, like, I'm someone who, like, I enjoy a good comedy, but, like, rarely does a comedy show ascend to the heights of greatness for me. It's not saying never. I can probably think of examples where it does, but, like, Murderbot feels like it has such potential to be a truly great sci-fi show. And I think this show has the potential to get there, but I don't think this season had any true moments of greatness. It maybe had a bunch of good moments, and it had a lot of good potential, and I'm excited to see where it goes from there, and maybe it'll build into something truly great. But I think maybe some of the sort of goofiness that it leaned into, and again, that like slightly more broad comedic tone is holding it back a little bit. Now, you could also say that like that first book from Arthur Wells isn't like necessarily the greatest Murderbot novel. I think it gets better and better as it goes. Again, I haven't read them all, but like, I don't know, man. I guess I'm kind of scattered. Mostly positive, but with the caveat of I want a little more from the show, but I am on board enough to like I want to stick with it, and I want them to achieve it. I just don't think it's there yet, but I'm hopeful. If that makes sense.
I think I'm partially there with you. There's a couple things about Murderbot, the story inherently, that I reacted to in Martha Wells' original work, and it was that it didn't feel like sort of a gritty, prestige sort of sci-fi story. It kind of does, but at the same time has those comedic tones, and the kind of premise from the start is one of kind of absurdity with equal parts drama and like realistic characters that I could identify with, and also truly comedic moments and things that seem far-flung in terms of like technology and futurism and some of the corporate stuff that's going on, but also like the comedy aspect of it sometimes lent it to almost like an absurd kind of comedy thing that I tend to gravitate towards. And like I think that the show is trying to do some of that, and maybe to like differing degrees of success, but ultimately ended up somewhere close to what I was thinking. Like we've said, I think the comedy becomes a little broader when this capstones at the end of these 5 episodes. I could see how going forward, all of the like real emotion of Murderbot and like what it means and what it feels is like all set up now. And I can see what you're getting at is like things can maybe improve from here. But so far, I did find myself reacting to it. And as a final 10 episode arc, it was just fun. And like I found it to be refreshing in a space that like I think oftentimes people want to play it pretty safe.
Yeah. It's interesting, man, because I get what you're saying. I had a good time with this show, and I am rooting for this show to continue, and I want to see what they do with it, what they do with the character. But I do fully grant that there is a contingent of fans, and it's hard for me to really judge how big, who didn't really view Murderbot as a comedy like this. Like it's like the character has a wry, sort of sarcastic view of the world, and it sort of amuses itself, clearly, I think, with its inner monologue. But the world around it felt a lot more serious than I think what we end up seeing in the show. At times, the show goes to that more serious space. I'm thinking about like Garathan later on interacting with a guy who was like his dealer and got him like helped get him addicted to drugs, and like all of a sudden there's like a fairly serious looking storyline going on there, or like the attacking the protesters, like things like that. All of a sudden that feels pretty serious. But then at other times there's just some goofiness to this show, and maybe it's still finding its sort of way, and it'll start to balance that out a little more. Or maybe that's just how this show's going to be. That's this interpretation of this world. And I'm okay with that, because something we've talked about over the years of covering adaptations is how sometimes the adaptation feels like an interpolation of the original, and that can be a really effective way of doing it. But sometimes it really kind of feels like its own thing that was inspired by the original. And I don't know that this fully goes into that territory, but it's maybe more in that territory than I originally kind of thought we were going to get from Murderbot. It feels like heavily influenced and inspired by. They're working with Martha Wells, sure, and I just don't know that it will ever feel faithful for people who really wanted a truly faithful one. And that's, an ongoing conversation we always have about books and faithfulness and how faithful does it need to be. It happens to be a book series that I really like. And so I think that always makes you more predisposed to want faithfulness out of it than people who are more middling on it or who haven't read it and don't really care, because there's a big contingent of new fans that are flocking to this series right now because they like the show. They've never read the book series, they don't know about it, and they're going to pick it up. And I'm excited for them because I think they're going to pick it up having seen this show, and they're going to be really taken with the book series, in my opinion, because they're going to have this fun kind of character that they're interested in reading about, and then they're going to read the book version and go, oh, okay, here we go. Because I don't know, I feel like if you come to the books after this, you're just going to be really, I don't know, just really impressed with the series. That's where I like to hope is going to happen and what I think is going to happen. So in that sense, I think this is a great ad for the book series, which is really, really good. We'll get to the end about what we think was better, what we think was worse, and make our final judgments on book versus show. But that's kind of where I'm at with it right now.
And I can't wait to hear Martha Wells speak about this too, because we have to ask her about this kind of stuff. She was heavily involved, from what I understand, and heavily maybe that's used for marketing and but ultimately it seems that she was involved.
Putting out set photos. Yeah. She's there with the entire cast. She's involved, it seems like.
That makes me think that she is in some way on board with a lot of these tonal shifts and stuff like that. And for the creator to back it in that way, I'm just so curious about how she feels. That the fan fiction thing, we talked about how she has a background in writing fan fiction, and you mentioned I don't think that was meant as a derogatory thing.
Yeah, I don't think so.
I think the main thing that I would think book readers and myself as well reacted to with this series is that so much focus was put on these other characters, and these other characters tended to be comedic in general, and I think that shifted
just kind of goofballs. It wasn't just that they were comedic; they were often completely foolish, and it really lent fuel to the criticism that Murderbot had, where Murderbot's humans are so foolish, they're always trying to get themselves killed, and that's just kind of the perspective of an AI dealing with humanity in the books, whereas here it's these humans are pretty fucking foolish. They're repeatedly doing pretty silly things. So it kind of lends fuel to that. Of course it's going to think that way. Yeah,
it's interesting because there is an element of the comedic nature of the characters also being a bit wholesome and being a bit endearing.
Yes, and I'm so, speaking a bit broadly to make a point. And it's also I'm trying to give voice to some stuff I've seen online. Admittedly, I'm actually more in the middle. I'm not fully there, but again, my wife is more on that side of she wants to continue watching the show. Don't get me wrong, but she's currently rereading all of the Murderbot books because she wants to. She's I want to go back to the books because I like them a lot more. So I want to grant that is a perspective a lot of people are having too.
Yeah, and to back that up too, I started out so I read the short story, then my fiance and I watched the first 5 episodes. In the intervening time, my fiance read the first Murderbot story and then has since moved on to the other ones. In episodes 5 through 10, 6 through 10 that we're covering now, she had a lot more commentary and was this has changed, this is different. And so it was interesting to get both perspectives of I was the one who knew more when we watched the first half, and then she was on board and kind of maybe even knew more than I did when we watched the second half of the series. And to that point, I think there are just always going to be fans, and there's a part of me that also feels this way, that the internal nature of the original story being so close to Murderbot and the way that Murderbot latched onto me as a character in Martha Wells' original story is another part that uniquely makes it its own thing that felt fresh and new. And I think there's some good work that's done in shifting focus and putting some on these characters in the show and making it a bit, because it's just it broadens out the show in terms of the world. We're getting much more content, quote unquote, than we did in the source material. And in seeing some of that, I think we're getting to see a commentary being made on humanity as a whole and what humanity tends to do and how dumb humanity can be at times, and how Murderbot through all of that has an arc of disdain. I think in the show maybe a lot more disdain, but coming around maybe on these characters, and then ultimately making its final decision, which is I think is still really powerful and is an interesting one to note with this show and the way that they adapted it.
Yeah, and we're going to get into more specifics. Two things while we're still in the general thoughts. So one point my wife brought up, Annalisa, and I thought this is an interesting one. I don't know, maybe it's a little conspiratorial, but it's an interesting thought, is that maybe there was some thought from the Apple higher-ups that they needed a more comedic sci-fi show because they have several more dramatic sci-fi shows like Silo, Foundation, that kind of thing. And maybe there was a push to make this more comedic to make it stand out.
It's possible.
It's possible. I don't know. That's something we could ask Martha Wells. I don't know if that's something she would know about or because that goes to like way back early on and them deciding to even make this show, right? And who knows who makes those decisions. So that was an interesting thought. But I also wanted to point out, and I didn't write down their names, but I've seen a couple of people online comment that they didn't even think of Murderbot as a comedy book series at all until they saw this show.
Yeah.
And I thought that was an interesting thing to note too. And it's just one of those how subjective the reading experience can be for people, right? And I can see, like, if you didn't even think of it as a comedy at all, and then you're reading this book, you're watching the show, and you're like, well, this is a straight up comedy. Yeah. I could see that being, a pretty big change for you.
Comedy is such an interesting thing because, of course, there's like you could look at something that just doesn't contain it. I'm sure there are sci-fi stories out there, like some of the classics. I don't know if Asimov was adding a ton of comedy. I haven't read much Asimov, so I don't know. But like in terms of that kind of thing, but like I remember when The Martian, the film came out. Sure. If you remember, like the Golden Globes, it was nominated in the category of like best comedy, like best dramatic role in a comedy or something like that.
And again, that's another one where it's like Mark Watney's cutting a lot, like he's cracking a lot of jokes for sure. Is it a comedy? Yeah. I don't know.
And I don't think that I really would have called this a comedy when I read the original material. I think I thought it was a funny sci-fi story.
You know, I think part of it is the Sailor Moon.
The Sanctuary,
the Sailor Moon stuff was out of nowhere. Where did that come from?
Yeah.
No, the Sanctuary Moon.
You're talking about Murderbot's costume changes, right?
Yeah. Just a lot of the Sanctuary Moon stuff was highly comedic, right? Like it was very ironic. It was like very over the top and silly, and like you could maybe get the interpretation that that's kind of what Sanctuary Moon is like in the book series, maybe, but we don't get shown this kind of stuff. We get a lot of the mentions from Murderbot where it just kind of recounts the plot real quick from an episode, but we don't get scenes of Sanctuary Moon like we do in this show.
It's difficult to depict the tone of an entire show in like a sentence of like kind of exposition about like what happened in an episode of the show.
It does sound like some of those plots are pretty ridiculous when Murderbot's recounting them, but we're actually seeing, the sex bot turning evil, and like it's very over the top and silly, and like that kind of stuff pushes the tone into so that knob of comedy just keeps getting cranked in some of those.
It's so funny though, because like if that's what's pulling it in the direction, I think it's the cast of Preservation. What's their
Preservation Ox or something like that. Yeah.
It's like them, and then the Sanctuary Moon stuff, and like the Sanctuary Moon stuff is some of my favorite parts of the show, just because of like that
comedy doesn't equal bad. I do want to like again put that out there, and some people who are show only watchers might fucking love the comedy. That might be the thing that pulled them into the show. I don't want to discount that. I tend to be someone who prefers more dramatic stuff over more comedic stuff, but that's not cut and dry, and there's plenty of comedies I do like. So I don't ever want to come across like I'm saying only serious drama is good and comedic stuff is bad, because I definitely don't agree with that.
I think there's something inherent about comedy to life, personally. I think some of the most dramatic movies I can think of have either quirks of comedy, like not necessarily jokes, but just like a funny cut in an edit or something like that. Like there's just satire to things sometimes. And so we're just getting in the weeds here about comedy a little bit, but let's move into some of these episodes here if you're ready.
Let's talk specifics, because I as much as I'm speaking generally, I do want to kind of break down specific moments I thought were really smart and really clever, and other moments where I had more criticism for sure.
All right, so episode 6 is called Command Feed. Murderbot and Mensa survived the explosion, but the hopper is damaged, and Sec Unit deleted the repair manual in order to make space for a season of Sanctuary Moon. When Mensa is having a panic attack, Murderbot calms down by showing her an episode of the show. They manage to repair the hopper using neural fibers from Murderbot's spinal cord. Meanwhile, at the habitat, Lee Beebe tries to get more information about the results of the preservation survey. When Garothan refuses to show her the data, she produces a gun, shoots him in the knee, and threatens the rest of the team. She admits that she is not a member of Deltfall, but of the third party. Murderbot returns and kills Labibi immediately, which leaves the preservation team in shock. While it gets repaired, Murderbot muses that the others had assumed that it was becoming like them, and that it actually felt good to execute Labibi.
Interesting episode. I liked the surgery scene. I think that it's another good moment of reminding us that Murderbot is not a human. Is able to just shut off its pain sensors.
I almost felt like Murderbot was lying in that moment, that it could feel some of the pain of what was happening, or
Maybe
could
it does.
feel like I don't know, discomfort, or was like, it didn't seem to think that it was grotesque or anything like that, but some sort of reaction was there.
Yeah, maybe it does feel a little bit of pain, but it just contextualizes pain differently than humans do, right? Like it's fine. It was pretty gross. This is one of the more gross moments of the show, like cutting into the spine. Like it looked pretty gnarly. And then at the same time, we got Labibi, which again is a show only character who has much to. I think you sort of predicted this in our last episode.
I wouldn't call it much of a
probably
prediction.
A double agent, and revealed to be. It does kind of come out of nowhere. It's interesting. Labibi maybe just was a quirky, horny character that was also a double agent. It was kind of strange that would be her behavior when she was like also just secretly there to infiltrate and like get information. But okay, again, comedy, you can just kind of go with it. You want the character to be interesting in a different way. But then she sort of takes everybody hostage, shoots Garothan in the knee, and then gets her head blown off by Murderbot when it returns, to the shock of everybody involved. Very short episode of Memory Serves, like one of those like 22-minute kind of ones that just went real fast. Which again, this is something that I get why they're doing it, but I want to, one overall criticism I'll go ahead and bring is I want them to push for more 30 to 35 minute. Like, it can still be pretty short, but those like 22-minute ones are just so fast. And unless we're getting like some sort of, I'm thinking about like The Bear when they had that one episode where it was like an entire thing was shot in real time in the kitchen and it was only like 20 minutes, but it was like really intense 20 minutes. If you're doing something like that, okay, but like otherwise, I don't know. It's feeling a little too short for me. I want to push for a little bit more length to these episodes because you're just getting going and then it's over.
Yeah, as much as I want to kind of support the filmmakers for sticking by their guns and being like, we didn't want this to feel like other sci-fi. We wanted it to feel like its own thing. We wanted it to harken back to the short fiction sort of space that the original takes place in. I also feel like I feel like I get invested and I'm ready for the momentum to continue. And it makes it bingeable. It makes it like very watchable to fly through episodes.
Very watchable.
But a little longer of episodes wouldn't have been, something. Yeah,
I think there's a happy medium. You don't have to go to full hour. You don't even have to go to 45 minutes. It's the streaming era. You can have any length you want. I think you could get to that 30-ish minute range, maybe even 35 to 40. If you want to put 40 as your kind of soft cap, you don't want to be over 40. That's fine. And that's still percentage-wise like a significant chunk more per episode. It gives you a little more freedom. Develop these characters a little bit more. Give them a little more space to breathe before you're wrapping up an episode. Gotta have that hook for the next episode, because they're constantly building to what's the hook for the next one. It's an effective way to do a story, but it kind of becomes a little transparent, I think, as the season goes on, that like that's what they're doing. If I'm being cynical, I guess.
Can you you ever get that situation where you're watching a show that's typically like 45 minutes to an hour, and then like a season finale or something comes and it's like an hour and a half long, and you're like, oh shit. Yeah. That's like, I feel like what we're due for with Murderbot season 2.
Yeah, like we get a full hour episode is like the premiere of next season's a full hour or something. I'd be really excited for that.
Yeah, that'd be cool. I think I don't know. They're adapting 3 books into possibly 10 episodes.
Yeah, that's gonna be a lot more content. Good point.
Maybe the lengths will get longer.
Maybe, yeah.
I thought that the gruesomeness of this episode was something that I appreciated, and like in this way that it's played for laughs. I don't know, I guess the spinal cord surgery isn't necessarily played for laughs, but it is kind of just like wild and absurd that you can just pull the way that Murderbot is approaching it. At least it is like reach in there and just start yanking stuff out, and like that kind of got a laugh out of me. And yeah, the gruesome nature of it is like it's showing the capacity of Murderbot to not be hindered by this kind of stuff.
It's interesting because it says something really troubling about the technology. And not necessarily troubling, but interesting and potentially troubling, because Murderbot itself is this fusion of biology and mechanics, right? Or electronics. And I think it even has a line where it says, like, you might not know, but they use a lot of like that semi-biological technology in these ships, because they found that it's like a really effective way of communicating data or something like that. Like there's some line about that, right?
Really dark when you start thinking
and so
about
you start
that.
thinking like, so we're talking about there's some like maybe some veins in the technology here. Or whatever they would be, nerves are being used. And I can see this being a thing because there are definitely certain things that biology is just really fucking good at. Like our brains, if you think of our brains as a computer, they're insanely powerful as a computer. So there's a certain power to biology that I could see at some point in the future us sort of unlocking and starting to integrate some of that into our technology. But it doesn't really linger on that, and I'm okay with that. But like there's some interesting ethics around Murderbot's creation that I think definitely we deal with some here, and it's going to continue to be important for the show going forward. So maybe you're just seeding some stuff here. But I hope that that's something we return to more and give it a little bit of gravitas to, give it a little bit of narrative importance.
Yeah, and I mean, it also reiterates the spinal cord situation, reiterates how much biology, because you might think, oh, the face, the brain, something like that. Murderbot itself has a spinal cord. There's a lot of like electrical signals sent through our spinal cords, that sort of thing. You would think breaking up a spinal cord of something biological would be devastating, and it's like get in there and just start cracking discs and pull them out and then get through there. I guess reiterating how much biology it might be here integrated into Murderbot.
I was a little unclear why it was completely unaffected by having its like spinal cord cut into. I can understand pain wise,
but
like function wise, like why is it walking around totally fine now? I'm a little unclear on that, but. Okay. Yeah. I mean, he did say like don't cut too deep, don't do anything like too damaging, but it was also like crack it open, like just break the bones and get in there. So
the other thing we were talking about is the Lubibi just getting blown away, and like absurdly funny to me.
Absurdly funny.
But it is a moment also of like, oh shit, like it could do this at any time to anyone if it wanted to. I think this is a point for Murderbot to process more of what killing a human is like. And in this instance, right? Like it seems like it has a history of possible killings and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But here it out and out does it. Now, for the sake of protecting the ones it is supposed to / cares about possibly. But it's a gray area, I think, for Murderbot to navigate. But ultimately, like to me, I was like, laughing and like, holy shit.
I think that's definitely the way they want you to think about it. I'll play a little bit of devil's advocate here and say that there's an element of Preservation Ox and their whole alliance, and they represent this quote unquote hippie culture that is successful enough to have its own series of planets, it sounds like. And yes, they have a bunch of like poly relationships and the characters themselves are goofballs, but they also represent the polar opposite to the corporation and the idea of the mechanized security bot. They don't love the idea that this person just got murdered. Yes, they were being threatened, but they don't want to kill people. And the show right now it kind of treats it as if like that's a really silly position and we should all kind of be laughing about it. But like, it's not a silly position to be against murder. But the way these characters present it, it feels like it is, right?
We talked about that some last week with like, are the poly relationships and are like their outlook on the world is kind of shown to be a bit like woo woo or something
naive.
That like
naive is used several terms, and I think that's fair. But like,
like what's the messaging there from an artist like that's like backing that sort of thing? And I think it's a bit complicated there for sure. But for the sake of this moment and the preservation of these people, I think the audience is on board with what Murderbot does to an extent.
Yeah,
it's like,
and I am for the record. I think Libby had shown her colors at that point, but I just don't want to dismiss the idea of this like peaceful group who wants to not just randomly murder people. It wasn't random, but you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, I'm with you.
Yeah.
I think it's like something to strive for. I think like their outlook on the world is one that I'm like, the world would be a better place, right? If everybody's like this.
But it's kind of being treated as if it's pretty silly woo-woo, like ridiculous, right?
Yeah. All right, so the next episode is called Complementary Species, episode 7. In a flashback, it is revealed that Garothan used to be a spy working for the Corporation Rim and was suicidal before he met Mensa. Meanwhile, the Prez-Ox team prepares to evacuate the habitat before the hostile third party arrives. Murderbot observes that Garothan's body temperature is rising. They still take the hopper and try to hide. While the team discusses their situation, 2 of the centipede-like creatures appear and mate, leaving their eggs attached to the hopper. Shortly after that, a sec unit of superior make attacks. The team unavailingly tries to help Murderbot fighting the aggressor, but when it accidentally destroys some of the eggs, the female returns, bites the sec unit's head off, collects the remaining egg sacs, and disappears. Garothan collapses due to his infected wound. Against Murderbot's advice, Mensa orders to take him back to the medical bay of the habitat.
This is a really good Garothan episode, and is a moment for me to say that this is one of my favorite changes, was the increased emphasis on Garothan. I think Garothan's a really interesting sort of foil for Murderbot. Understands Murderbot in a way we've touched on this before because he is an augmented human, right? And I think is very suspicious of Murderbot, but is uniquely positioned to interact with and understand Murderbot on a different level that the rest of the humans just can't, right? And I think this is a really, really interesting one here, interesting performance. And we get this background, right, where we find out about there was another form of coercion being used to control Garothan in the past, to make Garothan a spy who was addicted to a substance. We don't know what it is, but some sort of, seems like maybe some sort of
space meth
or space heroin or something like that, or maybe even like
it's supposed to be incredibly addictive, like the most addictive possible thing. Fentanyl.
Yeah, it's like some sort of space fentanyl, designed, because that's what fentanyl is. It's like a shitty drug that's just designed to be maximally addictive, and it sounds like that's something like that was being used. And I think this is good stuff. It adds gravitas to this character. I like the sort of unrequited love that he has for Mensa. I think that's an interesting thing to include with the character. I don't know how much of this stuff comes from later books. That is something that I don't know. But I like it being presented here. I like leading with it at the very least. And if it's fully added to the story, I'm enjoying it. I think it makes him a really interesting character, and I like this stuff quite a bit.
Yeah, David Dastmalchian, I thought did an excellent job.
Very good. He's a good performer in general.
And what I would say though is early on I was like, I've seen him play this character before. I find this character to be a bit like you're supposed to, as when you're pulling for Murderbot, you think Garothan is kind of a foil or a threat in some way, and you're like, okay, Garothan, whatever, you're annoying. Honestly, the way that the show handled this and took the arc for Garothan by the very end, I'm like, this is one of my favorite characters.
It's very interesting. Yeah, I agree. This is one of the best changes from this early material for sure. I like this a lot. The mating aliens were funny. Talk about like just kind of a funny moment. It's definitely comedic, but hilarious. And I like how there was I forget, was it Arata, one of the characters is, oh, don't interrupt him. This is really fascinating.
We need to study it. Yeah,
we got to study it. Even as they're like about to break the ship apart as they're mating on top of it. It was pretty hilarious. I had a good time with that.
There's a few areas where while the filmmakers said that they wanted to be really faithful and they didn't want to pad out episodes, I felt like there were some times while it was exploring interesting spaces, this felt like it was really interesting because we're getting more centipede stuff and we're getting another of these like other sec units. The superior sec unit shows up, but it felt like similar to an episode that we just had where Murderbot's fighting against other sec units, and like we've already seen some, like quite a few times we've seen these show up. I enjoyed the episode. I'm just saying I think they're treading over the same ground again a little bit here. In interesting ways, especially for a show that's incredibly short, like for the episodes that are short.
It was very short. It didn't feel like the plot moved much. And it kind of reiterated some stuff we already knew. I can see that. Again, the threat of the other sec unit showing up, a little toothless when it gets taken out so easily by the alien. Murderbot does say, like, I've gotten my ass kicked by this several times. So trying to reiterate that they are superior combat models, potentially. But we're seeing them get taken out pretty easily a few times now to where maybe that's a bit undercut by what we're seeing on screen.
I like to see characters, once they're built up, interacting in different ways, in different scenarios, and I think this all really worked for me. I just thought it was interesting to note, like, if you're really trying to be bare bones, be super true to the story, I just felt it to be kind of similar.
Yeah.
Ultimately,
I don't have much else to say on this episode, so that's maybe another line in your point, or another underlining your point is, other than liking the Garothan stuff early, and thinking that the mating sequence was funny. I guess seeing them try and like help but being so ineffective at it was comical and like, again, it's kind of endearing. Like, you appreciate that their heart seems to be in the right place, but they're so bad at it that it is just kind of laughable. You know, I forget who it is. I think it might be a Birdwatch or somebody throws the rock and it just hits Murderbot. You know, the throwing of the spear was funny because it was completely ineffective. Again, it's pretty humorous, but I struggle sometimes with them having such little self-awareness. Like, do they not see how ineffective they are? Clearly, no. They seem to think that they're helping, and that's funny, but also like a little maybe pushing credibility a little bit of like, why do you think you're helping? You threw a rock and it hit Murderbot. How did you not see that was ineffective?
As much as it's played for comedic purposes, like, this may be the first time they're in confrontation. They don't seem like to come from a confrontational society, and maybe this is like they don't know any better. They just don't.
And that's true. That's fair.
Not saying that it still wasn't a bit ridiculous to see them, you know, just be super ineffective. All right, yeah, so let's move on to episode 8. It's called Foreign Object. Murderbot accompanies the Prez Aux team back to the habitat. The recording of the security cameras shows that in their absence, more superior sec units and a representative of the hostile third party, now identified as Grey Chris, visited the habitat and left an invitation to meet at a rendezvous point to negotiate terms for their survival. After a security check, the Prez Aux team take Garothan to the medical bay. While Bharadwaj performs surgery on Garothan's leg, Murderbot plugs into his data port to turn off his sense of pain. The connection allows Garothan to find out what it calls itself and that the sec unit was involved in the deaths of 57 clients, which Garothan reveals to the group and condemns Murderbot for. Murderbot admits it's not sure if it killed the clients or not and agrees with Garothan's assessment that it could be defective or dangerous. Then it leaves the group to go out on its own. The Prez Aux team concludes that Grey Chris is illegally after the alien remnants and that they will liquidate them once they find out their location. After mulling whether to abandon or betray its clients, Murderbot comes back and announces that it has a plan.
I thought this was a good episode. I actually really liked this moment with Garothan. The sort of each side, Garothan and Murderbot are plotting to use this as a moment, I think, to spy on the other. And I like that this is something that Murderbot sort of is so interested in learning about Garothan's past and what's going on with Garothan that it doesn't foresee Garothan using this as a moment to learn about it. I think this is an effective moment. I like the reveal. This is a big sort of interpersonal climax that we're getting here prior to what is going to become like a more plot climax in the next episode. But I like this interpersonal climax of Garothan's sort of biggest fears seem to be confirmed as he uncovers this past event, and the big fear that Murderbot has about itself and that it is a Murderbot. Again, that it says that's not why I named myself this. I agree that's true, but there's like an element of that, and you can definitely say how it looks bad.
Oh yeah, that's it's always been the case, right?
Yeah,
even in the original material.
Garothan exposes this, and this is similar to the scene. There's a scene like this in the book that is a really good one, but it plays out a little differently here. It's more like directly confrontational. It's kind of presented in front of everybody. It's being called out in this way, and it's forced to sort of defend itself. I think this is a pretty good scene. I genuinely enjoyed it.
I like that you mentioned the specifics of the look of when it was happening, the merging and the way that they were able to do that. And I just want to call attention to, again, like the production design, the effects, the colors, the costuming. Like, this show is like top level production.
Yeah, we haven't highlighted that enough yet. This show looks great.
It looks awesome. And like for a genre that typically is extremely expensive, for them to like really not pull any punches, and that's got me wondering. I wonder if, in order to keep all the effects and to keep the production at this high of a level with this high of a budget, I wonder if that's a part of keeping the episodes shorter for a first season to see how it does, but still have like a prestige level,
keep the price down
of production. Yeah. So all in all, I that's something I'm curious about. No idea if we'll get any information on that, but maybe going forward, having proven that it can handle this, we'll get some longer episodes and maintain that level of quality. Because I was shocked, like this CG, like they're like merging sort of consciousnesses in this way. I thought it was so cool. It looked awesome. Cool. And in a genre when typically you're expecting like dystopian, bleak dreary, dark, and gray, this show's really colorful, and it's got a lot of like character to it, and it's got like its own visual style. And so like I would applaud it for that as well.
So Murderbot also uncovers the sort of unrequited love, right? Murderbot uncovers the "why don't you love me back" moment. I definitely think this is an open secret, right? Like Mensa knows what's going on here, and I'm curious to know if this is something that will be followed up on later, because...
Well, you keep... Yeah, just to jump in, you keep saying that, and it has me wondering, because I was convinced that we weren't going to see these characters again. Like these, because of the way that the season ends and because of the way Martha Wells' original material ends. And I am curious going forward. Like we had this theory about like maybe the tone of the show is matching this group, and as we move to another group, the tone of the show could shift. But I'm still just like wondering, and the last few episodes here make me wonder, are we ever going to see these characters again? Because it's a lot of character development that's been put into these characters to not see them again. And I feel like with a TV show like this and you get a good cast together, it'd be a shame to not see these characters again. But sorry, continue.
Yeah, I'm realizing maybe I've gotten a bit spoilery with some of that. I don't know what the show's going to do, and there are certainly elements of truth to we're leaving the characters behind and we're going off and having other adventures. But I've definitely hinted at that maybe there's some interaction with these characters happens again down the line. So I guess I will admit that does occur. Again, I have only read a few of the books, so to the level which they're going to be involved, I don't know. Maybe I'll know more in the future if when I get to read more of these books. But yeah, I mean, I think it's not that surprising to think that we're going to continue with some of these characters to some extent because they've done a lot of work developing them. I think you have a core cast here that you're not going to want to completely abandon, even as you do embrace probably a bunch of new characters that are going to be introduced in a future season.
Yeah. I didn't mean to dig too much to like spoil that for myself, but I also I think I was I was figuring that out near the end of the season as well, like already. And I just that was something that was kind of rattling around for me that I would be bummed if we didn't see Garothan again. I'd be bummed if we didn't see Mensa again, or at least have them mentioned. Like they can be sort of outer peripheral kind of characters as we kind of click in with some closer characters.
Let's return to this conversation when we get to the end, because I think that's really interesting as we start to theorize about what's going on forward. I want to hear your thoughts about what could be coming in a future season. But then we can also talk about some changes, because that final episode has some of the biggest changes. And we can return to that. But first we got to talk about episode 9. So let's get into that.
Yeah, so episode 9 is called All Systems Red, which...
Name of the first book?
Name of the book. They did the thing. Murderbot puts a dangerous plan into motion, pretending to betray the Prezox team in order to leave the planet. While the team expresses doubts and tensions rise, Murderbot keeps the true plan hidden, to have Garothan hack into Grey Chris's hub system using a drone as a transponder and launch their emergency beacon. The ruse includes offering to help Grey Chris capture the preservation team in exchange for being listed as destroyed inventory. Murderbot stalls the enemy using awkward small talk and quotes from Sanctuary Moon, while the Prezox team manages the remote connection. As the plan begins to succeed, Grey Chris prepares to torture Murderbot for the information they seek. Mensa intervenes and is caught in the crossfire. In the end, Murderbot shields her from the beacon's launch blast, which kills the Grey Chris team, nearly sacrificing itself. Before Murderbot's systems fail, it quietly admits to itself that these humans have become its clients not just by contract, but by choice.
This is a pretty fun episode. This sort of expands on what happens in the book, but it's pretty similar in broad strokes. One big change that I have somewhat mixed feelings on, but I see why they did it, was how much Murderbot didn't reveal what the plan was to Prezox. Because that's the difference. Like in the book, Prezox knows this is like a plan that Murderbot goes over. Like, I'm going to do all this stuff. I'm going to pretend like I'm completely rogue. And they know all of this. Whereas here, there's a bunch of them looking at each other going, oh my God, I can't believe it's saying this. Is it turning on us? And I think it's added for that dramatic moment. And it wants the audience to also be like, is it actually turning on them? I think it's to where I'm mixed on it is I'm like, I don't know how much we needed that. I get why they did it, but I guess I'm a little cynical about it because it feels like a little bit of a cheap bit of drama to inject. Whereas like if you've been watching the show, like you don't really believe this, that it's actually turning on them. But it also kind of knows that too, because it doesn't spend much time where we're supposed to believe that Murderbot is actually turning on the group, right? So it's kind of having it both ways, I guess.
I think I don't think anybody, audience included, thinks that Murderbot's going to turn on them. I think the drama just comes from the tension of like, how is it going to pull this off? And like not revealing that beforehand and having the characters react to it, I guess, just gives like a good jumping off point from that. But I agree, like it almost feels like a wash. Like it almost feels like it doesn't add much and doesn't, like, why change it? It's there. It worked well enough for me.
It fleshes out a full episode, makes this into like a full thing we can get into. Garothan has his moment where he has to go to the thing and like log in, and I think there's something like this that kind of happens. This is one of those unfortunate situations where stuff starts to blur because we read them so close together, and I can't remember the exact machinations of this plot in the book. I'd have to like revisit it now that I've seen the show. I think there was something that Garothan did.
I thought during this whole process we were just so much closer to Murderbot that we didn't really know what all was going on with Prezox in the way that they were.
Yeah, stuff was going on, but maybe it wasn't clear exactly what they were doing. Yeah.
To my memory, at least. I did love the situation where Murderbot kept quoting Sanctuary Moon.
It was forced to engage in small talk to like kill time, which is pretty hilarious. It's like the final boss for Murderbot. Instead of a fight, it's a final boss of trying to come up with ways to distract them. And so what do you think about this planet? Pretty funny.
I also like that, like at the end of it, the character realizes like, it's Sanctuary Moon, what the hell, and all this stuff. Yeah, I find that to be pretty fun.
Pretty funny. I like the moment where it jumps off. I forget what it says. I can't remember what the line is, but it says some line, and then it just jumps into the like off to the side to like get out of the way of the blast, but the blast doesn't go off.
Oh my god!
So they all walk over and are like, "What are you doing?"
Yeah. All right. Fully admit I had to look it up, but Murderbot jumps and says, "Boldness is all."
Boldness is all. Yeah. Which is a strange thing to say, and I think we can interpret must be a line from.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, some sort of battle cry or something. And like for that moment, it's like the "For Aslan" moment, and like boom, nothing happens. It's really funny. It works really well. And then to get into kind of how everything goes down, eventually, like, through back and forth, they eventually get it to launch, and Murderbot, grabs Mensa, jumps, and makes the sacrifice play here, and pretty emotional as Murderbot's going, like, powering down, and like and Mensa is like saying, "You did it," and all this stuff. I was like, damn, they pulled on the heartstrings a little bit there, and my fiance felt the same way. I was like, worked for me. They got me to care about Murderbot to that extent.
Yeah, able to shield Mensa completely so that Mensa's totally fine.
Right, Mensa's fine. And then what's so funny too is that when we watched that episode, because the season finale just came out a couple days ago as we record this, so that final episode wasn't out yet. So it kind of ended, and my fiance was like, "Is that the end of the show?" And I was like, "Yes, that was the end of the show." And then obviously, like right away, I told her no. Episode 10's coming next week, so
yeah. And I was a little curious. I'm like, what is episode 10 going to be now? Because we're getting into like what was a very sort of brief final bit of the
sort
book,
of epilogue,
but to fill out a full episode, I'm like, they're going to be adding some stuff here for sure, and they do. So we jump into episode 10.
Let's do it. Episode 10, The Perimeter. As Murderbot's systems reboot, Corporation RIM technicians delete its memory and install a new governor module. At the same time, the Prezox team negotiates with company representatives to find the sec unit. They offer to buy it and threaten with a lawsuit, but the company refuses, telling them that its memories have been wiped anyway. Pinley files an injunction to seize Murderbot for evidentiary reasons, while Garothan manages to retrieve the data that was downloaded during the memory wipe. He locates Murderbot's personality files by searching Sanctuary Moon episodes. The team saves Murderbot from being destroyed, and Garothan uploads its personality. It recognizes that without its armor, it looks like an augmented human. The team invites Murderbot to live as a free agent on their home planet. That night, Murderbot attempts to sneak away, but is intercepted by Garothan, who tries to make it feel welcome. Murderbot insists that it needs to check the perimeter. When Garothan relents, Murderbot thanks him. Posing as a servant bot, it boards a transport ship that departs as Mensa awakens and realizes that it has left.
And there's a couple lines right out of the book here, but let's focus in on more at the start of this episode, which is very different. Murderbot has been sort of retaken by the company, and memory is wiped. And it's a bit of a fake out, but like an interesting one, I guess, in that we think for a moment Murderbot is going to get melted down, has been completely wiped. It's also been repurposed as this like crowd control bot, right? Yeah, I don't know. How did you feel about this? Like, I'm mostly on board with it. It is a pretty big change. How did you feel about it? My wife was pretty frustrated. I will fully grant, but like I was less frustrated. I was a little more on board. I don't know. What did you think?
I think at this point in the show, I kind of wanted to see what they were gonna do. I was curious as I watched it. I was intrigued. I think that the tragedy of taking something's autonomy away from it, like, is emphasized here in these in all of this.
Just how much Murderbot is treated like a thing, not a person. Fully emphasized. Those two guys, that one guy in particular is like spitting on it and stuff, like really gross. We want Murderbot to just fucking wreck this guy.
Well, it gets into a scenario now to where I'm like, all right, so now I want to liberate all sec units, and like that's something going forward. I'm gonna need a full-on sec unit like uprising.
Rebellion.
And, like,
uprising, yeah.
So I don't know. I guess it's working in that sense to get me to that point. I think that seeing Murderbot used to almost again, like, kind of murder people seemingly based on like its memory. Again, I don't know how reliable that memory is at this point, but and seeing, today's day and age, seeing protests and seeing like, authority come in and like not play fair with the situation and people be completely outgunned by like these entities. In this case, this sort of like company or whatever it is. It's really like harrowing, obviously. And in a show that has a fair amount of tonal shifting, getting this, I think you're walking a delicate line here of telling a story that's important. Mm-hmm. And I think that ultimately they did. I think ultimately I thought that like good commentary to make. I don't know that it was like the most poignant thing, but for me, like it worked. And
a couple
like
of minor, depends on your judgment, plot holes that came up here because of this. One was like during the whole confrontation with the man in the crowd, there are two other sec units present, and it's like glitching, he says, and then they just jump on it and like start beating Murderbot, and I don't know, like it was a strange moment because it required me to also just like dismiss the presence of any other units, but then also like, am I supposed to be like mad at the protesters here? I don't know. I guess I'm just supposed to feel bad for Murderbot, and I do, but like, I don't know. It was a strange kind of moment. I wasn't really sure how I was supposed to feel. And then I was also just going like, where are the other sec units? Why are they also in this moment not doing anything?
I don't know. I felt like I understood why they would react this way and try to take down a Murderbot when they had the takedown a sec unit.
Yeah, that's why I was like, I'm not mad at the protesters here, but like I don't know. I wasn't sure how to feel. What happened to the other sec units? Why did they not do anything? It's very strange.
That I agree. I don't know what's going on there. I need to rewatch to kind of know what's going on there. And then ultimately, like, isn't there like a cutaway? So like we don't know exactly how everything went down to get Murderbot.
Yeah, it doesn't
to where
really
it
like
is.
Have any resolve for that. Like it's just fine later, I guess.
Yeah.
Kind of strange. But then there's the second. This introduces kind of a second plot hole, in my opinion. Grothin, and what I thought was a cool moment, is able to retrieve all of Murderbot's memories and what makes Murderbot into what it is. It has this kind of, has to sort of overload himself. He's feeling kind of sick as he's got all of these memories that he transports and then restores to Murderbot, who is rescued from the meltdown procedure, the last possible moment, by Penley's sort of legal maneuverings, and is able to get Murderbot back, which was a cool kind of moment, which again is played up for drama, but I think is effective. Grothin restores all the memories, but what I didn't understand is, and maybe this was addressed and I missed it, now Murderbot should have a working governor module because they reinstalled it.
Yeah, I thought about that too.
And there's no mention of that. So it's like, yeah, Murderbot's memories are back, but wouldn't it also now have a working governor module that at the very least would have to hack again?
That's what I was going to say, is I think I went through the mental sort of checklist of it knew how to previously. I assume if it was still active in getting these memories, it would then again know how to hack its own governor module again.
Yeah, I guess so. But like you would think that like a newer governor module would maybe be harder to hack, or at the very least, like it should have been just like a really easy thing, or it almost seemed like it was already hacked when its memories were restored, which was kind of strange.
Yeah, it's like I feel like Grothin should have said, all right, everything's restored and I have removed the governor
module or something. Yeah.
And in doing that, the governor is...
It needed like a line or something addressing it, because it definitely seemed like Murderbot was just back to normal.
But yeah, I thought Grothin going in, getting these memories, and there's again, respect, Garothan. I like how that went down. Clearly, he went through some pain and anguish to get
Had
this.
to engage with his former dealer, which probably brought up a
Yeah.
bunch of fucked up memories, in order to get there. And it's also like putting himself, kind of out there and taking a risk. So it's shown the sort of journey he's been on with Murderbot and the respect that he has developed, I think, for it. And that's further outlined by that final moment they have where it's Garothan who Murderbot talks with at the last moment, and then Garothan tries to ask Murderbot not to leave. And that's where, Murderbot says, I got to check the perimeter, which seems to be something that Garothan fully understands is like, I'm leaving. And they're and Garothan sort of cheering up over it. And I buy that because of what we've set up where Garothan had its memory. So I think Garothan probably understands Murderbot a lot more now, because of that at least storage of the memories that you would imagine affects Garothan in some way. There's maybe some lingering thing there. I'm a little unclear on that, but it seems like
I think so. But there was also a moment that I found to be kind of powerful where while Garothan had all of Murderbot's memories, he still doesn't know what it's going to do. He's still like in talking and saying, you have to check the perimeter. I need to check the perimeter, that stuff. Like, I think he's still thinking I can convince it to stay.
Well, because he also says like, give him a chance. Like, I feel like it's like Garothan is like recognizing that like he's been here because he had this moment where he decided to leave everything to join this group. And he's like, I know how they come off, but you got to give him a chance, And I thought that was kind of a cool bit of like mutual understanding and like understanding where Murderbot's coming from, where he recognizes that Murderbot doesn't feel at home yet and doesn't know its place. And Garothan at least seems to think like you can find it, but like that also kind of shows the inherent difference of like he is an augmented human, Murderbot is not. Murderbot is a cyborg, I guess, or at least like a bot of some kind, and maybe we'll never feel it like completely at home.
I thought that it kind of hammered home some of what I got from Martha Wells when Murderbot was leaving, with Garothan having all these memories. Even if you have all of Murderbot's memories, you still aren't it, and you still don't know what it wants and what it's going to do. And I thought that there was something like profound about that. Like, you can take all of its memories, you can pull everything out of it, you can erase it, but ultimately, like, there's something there that makes it. And like, even Garothan in this moment, like, of course, like all of what you said is also true, but is trying to there's a possibility based on the memories that I've seen that I can convince it to stay. And is not able to. And I think that that's just showing some of like the inherent like personhood or selfhood of this sec unit of Murderbot.
Yeah, and we also, this episode gives the Preservation Ox team a real moment to shine. And this takes place, but because we're so locked into Murderbot's perspective in the book, we don't see it as much. But like them really coming through for Murderbot, advocating for, fighting for. Murderbot has saved them, and now it's their turn to save it, right? And they do. Right. And so it kind of equals out their relationship in a way and shows how much they have come to care for it, which I think creates a big narrative pressure or narrative momentum towards we're going to want to see them reunited at some point in the future. Is it going to happen right away? I don't know. But like at some point, right? Like there's this indication of like, there's got to be some sort of reconciliation of this relationship, you would imagine.
Or at least like a checking back in. Like I think that is absolutely, and even if it was at the end of this entire story that is going to be told with this show, I feel like it's now been like the gun is loaded, for lack of a better analogy, I guess, is like it's now Chekhov's like sort of relationship here has been set up, and I want to see the end of it when it comes due, I guess.
Yeah. All right, man. So that's the end of the show. I think what we have left to do is to make our final judgments on book versus show, what we thought was better. That's normally what we do at the end of our coverage. But also make sure to check out our conversation with Martha Wells, because that'll be the true sort of cap we're putting on season 1. But for now, I'm going to go ahead and start because I feel like I've kind of tipped my hand a little bit. I'm definitely in a book is better situation here, but I will grant there are certain things I liked about the show. I really liked what they did with Garothan. I did find it funny. I can sort of appreciate it for what it is. It just isn't that the thing that it isn't as interesting and captivating as I found the Murderbot book and really the Murderbot series to be. So this is just one where I'm going to heavily recommend people read the books if you haven't read them. But I will grant that I had a good time with this show. I think it's good. I don't know that it's great yet. But yeah, I'm rooting for it to become great. And I think there's definitely potential for it to become great in the future with this production company and with these creators and with this cast. But yeah, for me, it's not quite there yet. But overall, having a good time with it. I'm curious for you, though, because you've only read the one book. How did you feel about that? Did you think this ultimately ended up being better?
I've talked a lot about what I like in the show. I think that it's so cool that Apple, I guess, is allowing storytellers to tell this kind of story with this kind of a budget and this kind of marketing put behind it. Like, the show's doing well. It's been renewed for a second season before the final episode was even out.
Which is great.
That's exciting to me. That shows like a commitment to sci-fi. It shows a commitment to genre. I'm really excited about all of that. And obviously I've talked about the visuals. I like some of the changes. I actually like some of the comedic elements, but when I read Martha Wells' original story, I felt like I was being introduced to something wholly new and something that like really engaged me. I almost have no doubt in saying that it's one of my favorite short pieces of fiction that we've read on the podcast. Like it was so the voice of Martha Wells, the tone of the story, the way that like it's dealing with these heavy topics in this like sci-fi future world, and the way that I could feel the richness of the texture of what could be expanded on, like, and how much I've heard like the praises sung of the continuing story here. I just like this story is awesome. And as much as I really wanted to do the show its due diligence, because I think that it's solid and I want to see more of it. But Martha Wells' book, like it did something to me that not many stories have. So I'm taking the book in this case.
I think also the show is doing this to some extent, but I want to make space for the fact that the book means so much to people in its representation of neurodivergence,
totally
autism, this sort of coded character with Murderbot, just like the identifiable nature of feeling like an outsider who struggles with human interaction sometimes, and how much people really connect with that. And I think that's present in the show. But I think that element is stronger in the books, and I think that's something people really attach to in this series, and something I really like. So,
and I think another major thing is that the show sort of shifted public perception in a sense, maybe just a smidge, where for this specific topic, and that is gender and a non-binary main character here. And
I was glad to see that we went back to it pronouns for the rest of the
for the rest of the show, which was, but just in the nature of having Alexander Skarsgård, I think like public perception of it isn't like with the story. I think the representation is so much more emphasized, and I appreciated that in the original work as well.
Yeah. All right. So if you enjoyed our episodes on Murderbot, let us know in the form of a rating and review on whatever app you chose to listen on. I think we're nearing 100 reviews on Apple Podcasts, which would be a really cool number to hit. And if you're on YouTube, make sure to subscribe to our channel, like the video, and comment below what you thought of the show, whether or not you read the books. Are you a book fan who also likes the show? Or are you someone who, is disappointed with some of the changes? We would love to hear from you, and that's a good way to do it.
Yeah, and be sure to connect with us on social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky, TikTok. We're all over the place. All of those at Ink to Film.
Yeah, we've been interacting with Martha Wells over on Blue Sky, getting retweets. It's been very cool. So check out Blue Sky if you're on there.
Oh, one thing I did want to say, too, while we're talking about Martha Wells, I saw since our last episode came out that she actually released another short story in the Murderbot diary. So, like, the saga continues, everyone. So
I think there is another novel planned. I was right about that when I said novel or novella, I'm not sure. But there's more to come from this series. It's not quite done yet. But she's a very prolific author that I do trust to continue to write this series. So I'll just put it at that. If you'd like to support this podcast in another way, we do have a Patreon, patreon.com/inktofilm, where we release bonus episodes every month. We have the ability to vote on upcoming projects over there. We have merch. There's all kinds of things available on Patreon. So if you're curious, check that out, patreon.com/inktofilm.
And thank you to Ross Bugden for the use of our intro and outro music.
All right, man, that's going to be it for Murderbot for now. But I'm going to go ahead and say, I'm excited about a season 2. I think we will absolutely return to that. And of course, super excited for Worldcon. We'd love for for you to come say hi if you are going to be there. It's something we're stoked to do, our first ever live show. It's a very exciting time.
Yeah, I can't believe it. It's definitely one of those things that you maybe don't forecast when you start a podcast 8 years before, but getting to do a live show at Worldcon and then Martha Wells joining us for such a cool story, it's awesome.
It's awesome. All right, that's going to be it. So until next time,
keep adapting.